good afternoon. Congratulations. How exciting, right? I remember sitting here like 22 years ago. So I definitely know what you're going through and super excited for you. And I hope this experience has been as profound of an experience as it was for me. Again, those people who know me, and there's several folks here in the room that know me, I'm a very outgoing person. But I actually took the time on all the bus trips around the state to do a lot of reflection. I would call my leadership Maine experience really a year of reflection for me. And so I kind of want to share kind of what I did with that reflection 22 years later. So I think my story is very similar to a lot of people. Small town Maine boy, raised in Maine, educated in Maine, and moved to Boston to find my career. Then I came back to Maine. I had an opportunity to come back to Maine, which was really great. Then I had to close a business, and I moved to New York. So of course, getting back to Maine was really important to me, and I worked really hard 25 years ago to come back. And it was kind of interesting because I was working in corporate America, making a fair amount of money, stock options, and nobody really wanted to touch me. I'm like, I promise I can really work hard for less money. But not everyone agreed with me, and so I was really having difficulty finding employers who were just interested in meeting with me. And finally, this community hospital in Pittsfield, Maine had interest in me. And I was like super excited. And so I went and I met with a CEO. I met with the head of HR who was leaving, and I was going to take over that role. And it was going really well. I'm like, okay, I'm putting on my charm. You know, I'm showing that I'm really shining my brilliance, and I think I'm going to get this job. And then I go meet with about 12 middle managers, and they're grilling me. I'm like, they're all looking around the room. These would be my colleagues and my peers, and they were kind of tough. But you know, I handled it well. They would ask me a question. I would look at every single person at the room, and I'm thinking, well, I'm at least connecting with them. But again, I could tell they were hesitant. They weren't really sure about me. So I started telling them, you know, all the things I could do to help their culture, all the things we could do to help them be better people leaders, and the things that I could do to really help engage employees more. So I think I'm warming it over. And then my next question. I'm sitting there, the head of emergency looks up at me and says, "Are you more a rock, a river, or a tree?" And I'm like, holy moly, okay. Is this a trick? Should I be trying to understand what this question is? A rock, a river, a tree? And I immediately think about my dad, you know, he's soft-spoken Mainer, you know, solid, consistent, common sense, you know, sort of the protector of our family. Then I thought of my mother. My mother is a big personality. You think I have a big personality? My mother's is even bigger. She is just, every day is an adventure. She just zigs and zags every day for the next adventure. She's kind of the heart and the fun of our family. So I'm sitting there thinking about my parents, a little smile on my face, and I'm realizing, David, you're in an interview, dude. Like, pay attention. I'm sitting there like, what am I? What am I? And then I finally just shouted out, I'm a tree, I'm a tree. But I'm like so nervous, like I'm like going, I really need to pee, I need to pee. And again, the reason I picked a tree, right, is tree is very rooted, right? It's very rooted in values, which I am very connected to my family and my friends. A tree also is super flexible, right? I mean, it goes with the wind. So I think flexibility and adaptability have always been, you know, big fortes for me. It also is bountiful, right? It produces fruit. And I have always been someone who gives gifts of wisdom, giving a lot of feedback as a coach. So again, I said I was a tree. But that question was asked to me 25 years ago. And I have reflected on it still 25 years later, right? And I definitely reflected on that question. So that happened in '98. So it was a couple of years later that I came to Leadership Maine. And I really thought about that question as I started my leadership journey. And the first thing was, I had realized that the first part of my career had been very much, I think I was a tight ass, right? I mean, I think I was super serious. I think I was a perfectionist. And I just sort of said, like, this is not what life is, because somebody's going to ask me another weird question, right? There's going to be a pandemic in a couple of years that we're not going to be prepared for. So I've just got to be loose. I've got to go with the flow, and I just need to take life not so serious and enjoy the experience. So that was one of the first things I realized. The second thing about this was that I realized that I had an opportunity to really redefine my brand, right? Like, this was a really good time after like the first 14 years of my career. I now had an opportunity to kind of, create a brand that I wanted for me. And so I really reflected on that as going into the program. But mostly, I think what I realized is the question itself had its own challenges, right? Because it was an absolute answer. Like, we had to come up with an absolute answer. And I just realized that, we're asking people all the time to put labels on things. We put labels on things. And I think it's like one of the worst things we can do for people, right? We ask kids, like, when they're this high, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, there's one thing like that they can be. We know that you can do 100 jobs amazing, right? So why are we putting pressure on kids to pick one job? And then they're in high school, and then we force them to do a major. Like, there's one major. Again, there's lots of majors that we would be really good at. And again, I work with a lot of college students, and I have to help them unlearn that their life is not predicted by their major. Their career and their life isn't predicated by what major they picked. So again, we do this, and then we start working, and we're sort of defined by our jobs. I'm an HR leader, right? Like that's all I am. Like, we're more than 15 essential functions, right? Like, all of us have a lot of talents and skills, and we as employers can't be limiting our employees and ourselves by a job description, right? So again, I think the question that really I started reflecting on is, we're putting too much emphasis on what do we want to be. And I really took the time to figure out, who do I want to be? So that, I think, really is kind of how I started my journey with Leadership Maine, is who did I want to be? I don't have to be how I had been, right? I just said, what is it that I want to do? Because I'd worked so hard at coming back to Maine, right? And I just wanted to make sure that if I'm back in Maine, I want the experience to be a good one. And I want to make the most of my experience. So the first thing, my first goals, I think there were like 5 goals that I set for myself during Leadership Maine. They're all written down. I still have them somewhere. So the first one was just continue and end your career in Maine. So I'm going to be retiring in 3 years from now in May. So I almost made that goal, not quite, but I think I've done it. So the first thing was just to stay in Maine. Obviously, the second part was, how do I make a greater impact, right? And I think what I had done up to that point, I had been very focused on, like, how fast was I advancing, what was my job title, how much money was I making? I was focusing on the wrong thing. And I realized that what was most important was I having fun? Was I being a complete person? And was I having impact? So the first thing I realized that I was kind of limiting myself and really focusing a bit as a workaholic on my career self, my professional self. And I realized I needed to work on a holistic self. So I know to help other people, I got to take care of me first, right? So the first thing I said is, stop working like all these hours, like start becoming your full self. So I really did take a lot of time and just started discovering, what do I love, right? So I discovered photography and gardening and and cooking and other things. So I started like really enjoying that. My husband and I have been together for 30 years, so this is our 30 years together, and it's like we're still newlyweds, right? So I feel like we have worked really hard at spending quality time together. We still do pretty much weekly date nights. Like, it's really important to focus on those relationships. And then I think it was just, really saying, you need to know yourself, right? And we all need to do different strategies. I don't really believe in the term work-life balance, right? I think it's just life, right? I think it's life. It's how you spend your time. But I am a person that puts a lot of energy into my work, right? I am traveling up and down the state every day. I go to events almost every night. So I am on like 120 all the time. And it's really hard for me to like go to 60, right? Like my body and the way I work doesn't really work that way. So I had to find my own strategy. So here's my strategy I incorporated 22 years ago, and I still use it. I work really hard for 3 months and then I take a week off. I work really hard for 3 months and I take 2 weeks off. I work really hard for 3 months and then take another week off, and vice versa, right? So 3-1, 3-2. That's my strategy. And it's really worked well for me. And anyone who follows me on social media will see that I'm traveling the world and having an awful lot of fun in those days that I take off. So that strategy works for me. It doesn't necessarily work for everyone, but it was a very helpful strategy because of course you have to stay rejuvenated and you have to be, you have to take care of you to put all of that great energy into what you're doing. I think I'd all spent a lot of time focusing on like what I wasn't good at. And I realized during Leadership Maine that I needed to focus on my strengths. Like if you lead with your strengths, it's a lot easier, right? So I am a teacher. I always wanted to be a teacher until I was a junior in high school, and I was quickly dissuaded by every adult I knew that I shouldn't go into teaching. So the good news is I'm teaching every day. I just get paid more than most public school teachers. But I realized that teaching was really important to me, and so that's kind of what I led with. So I started, I was an adjunct faculty member at Thomas. I was just starting to do a lot of speaking. I probably speak at least 50, I do 50 presentations a year. That's not part of my job, that's just stuff I do. I'm doing some of it on work time, Mike, but I do all the prepping in my own personal time. So again, my CFO, I don't want him to be calculating all those hours. So again, and if you say an average audience is like 40 people over 25 years, that's like 50,000 people that hopefully I've been able to speak to, connect with, and hopefully take action or to at least think slightly differently, right? So that's a pretty big impact. I also really believe that we have to use our knowledge and experience and share it with others. So I also spend a lot of time each week coaching people, people new in career, probably 7 to 10 people a week. I talk to just about their careers. So these are new professionals. These are people interested in HR. I talk to a lot of folks moving to Maine. So I am a goodwill ambassador for Maine, just kind of talking about the great employers here, all the things that are happening. So a lot of people moving to Maine do reach out and sort of use me to help connect them to a network. And I'm now loving people in my age group at end of career to sort of say, like, how are you going to still be vital? How are you still going to have purpose? And how are you still going to have impact even post-career? So that work for me is super important. And again, as Yellow said, I've been able to work for a company, and especially right now, Bob Montgomery Rice at Bangor Savings Bank, when I got to create my job as the diversity officer bank, for Bangor Savings Bank, the first one ever, 5 years ago, one of the first diversity officers in the state of Maine. He also said, David, this isn't just about Maine workforce, just about BSB talent or BSB DEI, it's really about Maine workforce and Maine DI. So it's been really exciting to be able to be in conversations. So I think that was the next thing that I learned and recognized during my journey with Leadership Maine was the importance of partnerships, right? Not one of us can do anything alone, right? No one organization is going to be able to solve any big problem. We have to work together. And it's really been such a pleasure of mine to work with so many incredible like-minded organizations and people to really solve big issues in the state of Maine over the last 25 years. So I do think for me that was a big learning because I think if you were strong enough, if you were wise enough, you could kind of do it on your own. But I've definitely learned the only way we're going to solve labor issues, the only way we're going to be able to import more talent from other countries here is we've got to do it together. Which brings me to kind of my next learning and my next goal, which was about I needed to do several things. First of all, I needed to have courage. So I felt like I had probably lost my courage a little bit during my journey. So part of the journey is being able to push back. So I clearly had been an HR person for a number of years, and I think I did good work, but I think I was doing a lot of good work for the companies I worked for. And I realized that part of my job as an HR leader was to be an employee advocate and to make sure that employees were having incredible work experiences. I wanted people to leave work feeling really good about work and not feeling that it was stress, but it was actually pleasurable. So I've been really good at pushing back on the organizations I've worked for about creating better work environments. I also was one of the first people 5 years ago that said, you know, Maine, I love you. I worked really hard to get back here, but we're not super welcoming to diversity and to people from away. And you've got to stop saying you're from away and saying, thank you so much for choosing to live and work in Maine. Now I hear a lot of people saying that, but that takes courage, right? You need to be very respectful and honor the traditions and the history of our state as you've kind of journeyed throughout the state, but we also have to challenge where we're not progressing and we're not being innovative and where we're not moving forward. So that does take courage. And the last thing, I feel like this is like kind of Cinderella, like have courage and be kind. But I really did learn. I mean, you would think I would know how important people were, but I really think that I recognized how fragile people were. I think during, when I came through it, there was just a lot going on in the world. It was the start of what we've now been seeing for the last 25 years. But, just a lot of people being hurt and a lot of people just dealing with a lot of crisis and a lot of challenges. And I just realized that, making somebody feel special, making somebody's day is something within our control. And so that has just been a big part of my goals that I kind of set for myself 22 years ago. And I think I did okay. Like I feel pretty good. Like I guess MDF thought I did okay by giving me an award, but I think it wasn't, again, so there's nothing simple about it. Okay, thank you. So it's not like major goals. It's just about sort of putting things in perspective, recognizing what you're good at, recognizing how you can have impact, and then just kind of going for it and just keep at it, right? I think part of what I've learned is just keeping at it. And again, that courage and that consistency is super important, right? So that's really my leadership journey. I don't know that I have a lot of other things to say. I guess another thing I learned, Mike heard the story a couple of weeks ago when I was talking to our leadership committee and talking to our board. So, I will continue to kind of talk about it. So I did work in corporate America for the first 15 years of my life. And I literally, my uniform was a gray suit, white shirt, blue tie, and black shoes. And it was really painful for me to be a waddling penguin with all the other penguins. And, I just am really super happy that I can be my authentic peacock self. So we just have to remember that, allowing people to be their true self is really important. And especially as I continue to look at younger LGBT folks, 50% of them are still not out at work because of fear of not being supported and not be given the same chances of advancement. And that's just one population, right? So we need to understand that as employers and as leaders, we need to continue creating safe space for every single person in Maine so they can be their true self, that they can be their optimal selves and their, reach their optimal potential. So I will conclude by saying, you can use Rock River Tree if that motivates you. I'll ask you a new question. What's your superpower? What's your superpower? And how might you use that superpower to better Maine? So that's my question. That's my action for you all to take. There's so many great opportunities here in the state of Maine. Don't end today with graduation. This is just the start of really making a difference for the state of Maine. So again, congratulations. Good job. Round of applause. And Jan, thank you.